Alrighty, welcome everyone to Veeam Product Strategy Live, episode 8. 8, would you believe?
We've done this
Awesome.
8 times.
8 times, yeah. I thought we would have been done after one, but we're back here on number 8. Minus our regular Michael Cade today, but we've got Melissa Palmer and David Hill joining us. David actually just made it, not in a car, no daughter to speak of today, so he is going to have a clean episode. It's very rare, people. So
yeah, I've ditched the daughter. Now all I've got to do is pray that the sun stays on his switch for the next 45 minutes.
I think you're fine. And Michael's on holiday somewhere in the countryside of England or on the coast, one of the two. But yeah, he's managed to switch off for the week, which is
well, he hasn't really, because he's still been replying to everything on Teams.
Yeah, to be fair though, he has been a lot quieter than usual. So I actually thought he was going to jump on this to start with. So he's doing a good job. Maybe I should take a holiday. In fact, I'm taking a holiday in a couple of weeks. So in 2 weeks. So yeah, we won't be able to record this in 2 weeks because I'm taking a boys' trip down south. Which is going to be a good time. But yeah, we'll hopefully I make it back. Anyway, so today's episode we're going to be talking about product. For one of the first times. Like, we don't usually talk about product, right? We usually talk about things that are happening in industry, give a bit of a perspective, but we thought that given that we have V10A, Veeam 1A, 10A, and also Veeam Availability Orchestrator V3 released in the last couple of weeks, that we might spend a bit of time talking about them and how they're significant, right? Melissa, it's like Veeam Availability Suite, right?
Yes, Veeam Availability Suite is a BNR plus Veeam 1.
Plus Veeam 1. And actually, interestingly enough, what is Veeam Availability Orchestrator really at the back end?
So Veeam Availability Orchestrator is our answer to a lot of the common DR issues that people face today. So it's orchestration automation suite to recover your VMs in the event of a disaster or even help you migrate them to someplace new.
Yeah, okay. It's like you've prepared that statement.
I say it like I can't tell you how many
said
times.
That before. So. Yeah, no. So Melissa, so actually for those out there that might not know, I think a few people do know that in the product strategy team, we all take, I guess, leads on certain products and major features. And Melissa is the lead for Veeam Availability Orchestrator. David's the lead for the sort of cloud native backup for AWS and Azure situations. And I kind of do the cloudy stuff and a bit of the VMware stuff as well. But
service provider stuff. Don't kind of sell
the service provider stuff. Yeah, it's very important to us, the service provider stuff. And actually, we'll talk about.
I can't believe you didn't actually come out with that first. It's like your first love.
No, it is. I got to hide it sometimes. I got to not make it as obvious, all the time. So yeah, I mean, people give me a lot of the proverbial for it anyway, but it's all good. I love my VCSPs. But why don't we start with, I guess, let's start with Veeam Availability Orchestrator, actually. Sure. And yeah, let's kick it off there. And, this is number 3.
Number 3. Yes.
Yeah. So we've done a couple of releases, but, this release had something significant and probably more of a game changer in terms of where this is going to be going as a product, right, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, VAO is kind of near and dear to my heart because it was kind of the first thing I started with when I got to Veeam. So when I got here, I started with working with the beta, then I saw version 1, version 2, version 3. Version 1, we started orchestrating the recovery of Veeam replicas. Version 2, we added the ability to orchestrate the restore of Veeam backups. And in version 3, we added NetApp ONTAP integration. So for those of you who don't know, I actually worked for NetApp for a number of years before I came to Veeam. So I was kind of like, this is awesome. It's like the best of both worlds all in one. And, a lot of customers out there are using NetApp SnapMirror to replicate to DR, right? Something very common. But we have the ability to kind of orchestrate and automate that whole failover process and then kind of run all these different, what we call plan steps on your orchestration plan to actually test your application and make sure it's working after you fail it over, which is really cool too.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, yeah. So, and it's a product that we've kind of aimed at enterprises, I suppose, because that's kind of the target of that. It's really aimed at the moment for those organizations that have 2 locations, right? A normal sort of on-premises location and a target site of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. Or you might kind of have a many to one DR relationship. It would be a great candidate there too. You can do a lot of great things in BNR for recovery, right? You can log in there, use instant VM recovery, and version 10 start up 10 VMs at once, right? But, if we're talking about the scale of having to fail over multiple applications or even a whole data center, that's a lot of stress to put on your Veeam backup administrators, right? To be able to go in there, recover everything, and then verify it's working. So with VAO, we can kind of empower the application owners, because we have these site scopes that we use as our RBAC construct to go in there. They'll only see their applications and their components and their recovery resources, and they'll be able to go in there and actually set up their orchestration plan, which takes about 5 minutes, really simple, and then leverage Veeam Data Labs to actually do a DR test in minutes, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. So it's all about ease of getting that, taking that DR plan, which is complex. I mean, we all know that creating end-to-end BCDR is complex.
Exactly.
When I think of it like what I used to work on in service provider land when I was doing, say, cloud connect replication, that was really just the replication part. The actual holistic DR part wasn't really part of the process. We just offered the replication piece. So Veeam Availability Orchestrator kind of does that, doesn't it? It also produces reporting as well. Is that right?
So we have 4 main document types that are absolutely amazing. One of the most popular ones is actually the plan definition report. So when you create a plan in VAO, you see every VM in your plan, where it's going to recover to, every step in your plan. But more importantly, you can actually see kind of the audit history of that plan. So you could see Melissa logged in, she created the plan, she did all these steps. And then Anthony and David, they logged in and they made some changes, right? And we can subscribe people to these reports in VAO. So you're always getting them to your mailbox to kind of make sure, hey, everything looks good. Or you say, oh, Anthony logged in and what he did really wasn't what he was supposed to. So before I have a potential exposure here, I can go fix it. And I have a whole audit trail as well.
Yeah, standard for me to do something not quite
right.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we have reports for data lab testing and actually executions that will tell you if you're meeting your RPOs and RTOs. And we also have this really great lightweight check called the readiness check, which will kind of check your RPO all the time, check your recovery resources, and just make sure everything's good to fail over on a regular basis. And we can run those like daily and subscribe to them. It's really easy.
But there's also an automation engine, isn't there, really, where you can tap into different automation pieces, PowerShell, anything really, to try and actually on the flip side, when you fail over, you can then do stuff.
Yeah, so you can, as part of your plan, you can kind of set all your plan steps on the per VM level. So we have a lot of canned enterprise application verification stuff, Exchange, SQL, IIS, web servers, etc. But then you can actually upload your own PowerScripts to do pretty much everything you want. So you can have VAO run a script to change DNS at the beginning of a failover, not necessarily against one of your VMs, but to do anything else you need in your environment. I used to work in pharmaceuticals before I joined the vendor side, and that was highly, highly regulated. So whenever we did like a migration or a failover, we had to re-verify those VMs to make sure, they are where they're supposed to, they have the correct resources, everything is good. So any kind of verification scripts you might be using for your application, your environment today, you can just pop that all in VAO and have it run. And you can set them up so you can actually kind of output the output of your script right to the reports too. So you can say, okay, I ran this step, here's what happened, just kind of simple write hosts in PowerShell and get all of that in your reporting as well.
Yeah, and what about, and obviously you mentioned the NetApp integration as well. That the fundamental difference there from what I know, and again, I'm not as well versed on as what you are, but effectively that is doing the replication on the actual hardware itself.
So we're kind of doing the failover. So when you actually fail over a snap mirror, there's a lot of stuff you have to do from actually, failing over to getting everything running in VMware. And I actually migrated a whole data center using NetApp SnapMirror manually. So, if we're talking migration and your site is still available, VAO will quiesce your SnapMirror, it'll break it, it'll mount it in your new data center to your ESXi host, it'll register your VMs, it'll start them up for you, and then run all those verification steps.
Is that on a data store level?
Yeah, data store level. So instead of having to have, the VMware team, the application team, the NetApp team all on the phone together coordinating, okay, and this is what I used to do, because I used to be the VMware person, right? The storage guy would be like, okay, I quiesced the mirror, it's ready to go, I broke it, here's what you need to mount into ESX. I would have to mount it to the host, make sure I could see everything. Then I'd have to go in and register the VMs and all that kind of stuff. No, it's just pretty much one click and VAO will do all of that previously pretty manual stuff for you.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's an what do you call it? It's a product that hasn't, I think gotten the light of day that it probably should have at the moment. But I think as you continue and we continue to iterate on it, it's
Exactly. As
obviously
it becomes more and more mature and more features are added, it just kind of lends itself to a little bit of re-education and looking at it again. Some customers might have been saying before, hey, I'm a NetApp shop and I use BNR, but I'm using SnapMirror replication, right? So now we integrate that. And the best part is you don't actually have to be a Veeam backup and replication customer to leverage this for NetApp, right? You can deploy it completely standalone and have it basically just manage your NetApp failovers and your NetApp recoveries, which is really cool.
All in software from our side, dealing with hardware on the flip side. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Well, that's VAO V3, and looking forward to what's
free
coming.
30-day trial. Head on over to veeam.com and download it today.
Yeah, there you go. You'd done that before. Awesome. So let's move into the availability suite now.
In banners now above Melissa's head, and
have
the thing
putting out the hand and doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So Veeam availability suite V10A. So V10A is a major release for us, I suppose you could say. I mean, it's not touted as a major release, but in terms of the feature set and some of the enhancements that it introduces, it's pretty big. As I look at the main sort of bits and pieces, I mean, probably the top level one that David probably can talk about a bit to start with is what we were calling platform integration services internally. I'm not sure whether we externally call it that.
No, we don't.
David, what do we call it externally?
So it's basically native AWS backup integration into Veeam backup and replication. So we were calling it internally platform integration services because, as we always talk about Veeam being the platform for the backup solutions, as we're growing all these different capabilities across all these different public clouds and different essentially orchestration layers around Kubernetes and that kind of thing. I always have to get Kubernetes in there at some point.
Always Kubernetes.
If you think about it, Veeam backup and replication is essentially the core of the Veeam platform. So with the AWS integration, what's really cool now is we've had Veeam backup for AWS. It's been generally available since December. And that was a standalone product that you could go to the AWS marketplace, deploy Veeam backup for AWS and start backing up your instances, do a little bit of Melissa, and obviously you can go get a free edition that allows you to back up 10 instances, or you can go
not to be sneezed at that, by the way, not to be sneezed at.
No, it's not. Free edition where you can back up 10 instances is pretty cool, especially when you're a small business. But what we've essentially done is everyone always talks about this utopia of this single pane of glass, where you can manage all your different platforms through this one window and this one single pane of glass. And we've all been there as administrators where you've had 4 monitors on your desk trying to manage all different platforms, different solutions, and it gets complicated. Well,
actually, just a little side dig into that. Interestingly enough, when I was managing the platforms and the architecting of the platforms that I was managing, I didn't care about that. I never had this fixation that I needed to have this single pane of glass. And look, I'm not trying to defend it at all. I understand why, but I don't get this maniacal focus by a lot of people out there.
Back in my admin days, because all the monitors were CRT, so I had 6 of them around my desk, and then nobody could see what I was doing. So I used to hide behind them. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, great.
Why do I want a single pane of glass when I can just hide myself? But all that's happened now, though, is if you think about that from an administrator's perspective, you've got less monitors, they've just got bigger. So you still have the same amount of windows, but if you use Cade as a great example, buying his 45-inch monitor, I still like my multiples. I've got my 32-inch, my 27-inch, and my 24-inch.
Hold on, I'm just going to go check this side of the monitor over here, and then I've got to go check this side of the monitor over here.
But the problem is now you still have the same amount of windows open managing those platforms. They're just spread across different monitors, or one monitor. Windows is good for kind of doing your tiling and stuff. But what Veeam's trying to do, and what Veeam's doing very well, is building out that single management interface. If you want to look at it that way, obviously the single
it's a
pane of glass
management interface. Yeah,
it's
point of control. A point of control, I think, is the better way to put it, right?
Exactly. So rather than I open this console to go manage this, I go and open this console to go and manage this, I open this console to go and manage this, you have this single interface that you go to. And with this AWS integration, you can now manage all your AWS backups from Veeam Backup and Replication as well. And the benefit to that is you see everything in one window. So when you're doing your reporting, all your reporting's coming through VBR. You can manage your AWS backups. You can manage your AWS snapshots alongside your vSphere VMs and your Linux physical backups. Everything that you create in Veeam Backup and Replication, from a backup administrator perspective, it's all there in that one window. Yeah. So what's really good about that is, from a process perspective, which is very important when you're looking at enterprises, you don't have to build multiple processes and multiple solutions to go and back up your workloads regardless of where they are. And this is obviously going to expand. It's not just going to be AWS. It's going to get bigger. It's going to support other platforms as well as we go forward. And just having that single interface to manage all that data is pretty critical when you're thinking about like how you can manage it from a ransomware perspective. You just don't want to be, oh, where is this workload? Oh, it's over there. I need to go here. So,
and I think as well, critically, I think from my point of view, if I think about this from a API level, so if we get information about all of our policies that we're backing up, whether it be EC2, local agents or whatever, if we can derive that from a API, which, you know, the Veeam Backup Replication engine can have, that means that we've got this ability to draw out all that information centrally as well. So I think that's one of the benefits as well, is that once you get the information stored centrally, then you can do stuff with it through those interfaces, whether it be PowerShell or the APIs, we enhance that. So yeah, I think that's another big part of that.
Yeah, and the final piece that is kind of really critical from an AWS perspective as well is the whole mobility piece. So when you manage all your AWS backups through Veeam Backup and Replication, you're enabling the Veeam Universal License, which allows you to move those workloads wherever you want. And I'm going to do a bit of a shameless.
And portability as well.
Yeah,
and portability.
Like one of the demos that will be released on Veeam.com fairly soon that shows you how this all works is, you literally, all your backups are there, whether it's a vSphere VM, the AWS backup, whatever. You just right-click on it and you can go and restore it wherever you want. So you can even do like the instant VM recovery to vSphere. And you've obviously done demos on that in the past where you're literally streaming the data out of object storage and you're booting up this EC2 instance on a vSphere host within seconds. And that power of this integration and just being able to do that, regardless of what you're backing up and where it's backed up, is what's driving all this.
Yeah, and that's not only license mobility, but ultimate workload mobility and portability that's enabled by our data format as well, the VBK
and
format.
That flexibility that Veeam always brings, you know. I
was actually talking to a customer yesterday, a big customer, and that when I talked to them about the portable data format put in together with our ability to basically back up into a repository and then recover to anywhere, they were actually blown away by that. They said, I didn't think it could be that easy. And that's a good feather in our cap, right? So that's awesome. So that's the sort of leading feature, I suppose. It's one of the coolest features of 10A. But Melissa, as well, in Veeam 1, we've got a kind of a similar sort of functionality with regards to Veeam Backup for AWS, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing Veeam is really good at is when they have these great new features come out in backup and replication, they're also in Veeam 1 as well, right? So with version 10, now we got all this NAS visibility in Veeam 1. So when we kind of added this AWS plugin so you can access all your AWS info from VNR, we have the same functionality in Veeam 1. And it's really funny, Anthony, because you had a great blog post on how to set up VNR 10A with AWS, right? And you can actually go deploy the AWS appliance from VNR. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to follow Anthony's blog post and do it. And I got everything up and running. It was pretty cool. And I had already actually upgraded Veeam 1 to 10A. So I reached out to Kirsten on our team because we do a lot of Veeam 1 stuff together. I'm like, hey, this week I'm going to set up all the 10A stuff in Veeam 1 for AWS. Do you want me to ping you when I do it? And we'll go through it together. Because I'm thinking, okay, there's probably something I have to do, right? So I log into Veeam 1 and it's just magically there, right? There's like a new tab for, I think, cloud data protection or something like that. And you can actually see all of your policies from AWS right in Veeam 1, which is like super awesome because you can see, okay, my backups are successful, they have failed, my snapshots are successful, they failed, whatever you, complete status in Veeam 1. So for those of you who are using Veeam 1 to kind of monitor your environment, the functionality is built right there. But it goes further. What is your favorite Veeam 1 report, Anthony? Do you have one, David, Anthony, favorite Veeam 1 report?
Report?
Yeah.
It would be vCloud Director related.
Yeah, of course it would
obviously.
be vCloud Director related. That was a dumb question.
Yeah.
Like, how about you, David? Do you have a favorite report in Veeam 1?
No.
I'm fishing for an answer here. That I'm not getting.
Awesome. Every single
they're all
report
awesome,
you can pull
right?
out
We
is
have
awesome.
What report's your favorite?
We have a report that's kind of a fan favorite, right? So it's the protected VMs report, and you can see what VMs are protected and what VMs are unprotected, right? So we have the same functionality for AWS. So you see your policies in the Veeam 1 console. You go to Veeam 1 Monitor, you go to Veeam 1 Reporter, you generate this report, and it shows you what VMs are protected in AWS. Or I'm sorry, what instances are protected in AWS, right? But then it also shows you the instances you're not backing up as well, too, so you can make sure you're protecting those.
Okay, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool, actually, I suppose, yeah.
And it took nothing to set up. I thought I'd have to do something, right? It was just kind of magically there once I upgraded everything to 10A, yeah.
Part of the update, boom, software. Speaking of which, so the other things that are in there, I think we'll finish off on a few of the platform support. So support for Windows 10, version 2004, Windows Server 2000, well, not 2004, Windows Server 2019, version 2004. Yeah. That actually reminds me, I'll tell you a funny story about that. So I was interviewing someone back ages ago. And in the interview process, you always try and trap someone because they all say how much of an awesome engineer they are or whatever. And this guy was claiming to be a Microsoft Exchange expert. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I asked him, so what about, Exchange 2009? Like, that was an interesting version. Can you tell me some experience that you had with Exchange 2009? And he started to basically rattle off for 10 minutes about Exchange 2009. And straight away, I was like, yeah, that's you done, buddy.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you. If there was a Windows Server 2020, would you want to install it?
Oh, geez, might have a virus.
I know, right? It might be a little...
I just walked into that one.
I still like Windows 2003. I still think it's the greatest operating system Microsoft ever produced.
2003. See, I
reckon it's with like 64 mega RAM. It runs great. It's not very secure.
I reckon Windows XP was my favorite. I think still in terms of desktop operating. I loved Windows XP and I had my best gaming experiences on Windows XP. Anyway, we digress. This is what we normally talk about on this show. Just nothing. But yes. So, Linux kernel, NAS backup got some interesting supportability and some licensing changes, which made it free, I think, for file up to 250 gigs. So basically adding a free tier in there. I think I've quoted that right. But I think the other biggest integration was around our performance of restores for object storage. And this is actually really huge, right? And this is something just to finish off on. So basically, I've been preaching about our capacity tier, our scale-up backup repository, the fact that we can, push stuff to object storage now. And we've got this copy mode and this move policy, right? The copy lets you get it up there quick. And then that means is that you've got low RPO points of your backups up in object storage. Now, the cool thing about it is because of the way that we do the copy up to object storage, we copy metadata as well, which means if we had a site outage, we can just basically spin up a new Veeam server, connect the repository that's an object storage repository, do an import, mount, and we'll be able to basically recover directly off the object storage. Now, that was okay in terms of speed. Like we were getting some kind of speeds around the 30 megabytes per second. It's megabytes per second. say off Amazon S3. And we were kind of thinking, well, we could probably do better. Where's the bottleneck there? So R&D went away after the release of 10A and saw and kind of said, how can we improve this? And there was a hot fix that was released probably 2 weeks or maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago that I tested. And that hot fix is part of 10A. And effectively in my testing, and I actually just released a blog on this this week, effectively going from 30 megabytes per second all the way up to 420 megabytes per second. Like outrageous speed increase in the restoration.
Would you say they turned the speed up to 11?
I don't know what they turned the speed up. Well, it was a factor of, what was the factor there?
Get it? Turn it up to 11.
I do get it. I'm just trying to see what the actual number was. I think that the speed was it 18 times? It was a 14 to 18 times more, which is unbelievable. But what it opens up,
you could have just left it, it would have sounded good.
Yeah, I know.
Didn't you?
Nah, but to be fair, the higher the better, right? Going from 30 to 400. But what it opens up, though, is just the ability to leverage that particular feature now and that use case, which wasn't a use case that was first thought of when the guys were developing this feature. It was more just to get data offsite and make it cheaper on premises and long-term archive and leveraging the power of object storage. Now migrations are possible and on-demand recovery possible. So I had an SQL server. It was about 50 gigs, so not very big, but a good control VM. Before 10A, I was able to restore it into a VMC environment, an SDDC. It was taking about 33 minutes. With 10A installed, under 2 minutes. Okay, so that's a really impressive boost in speed from just a bit of software update, right? So really amazing job by the R&D team and the specific dev guys that are working on the object storage support to increase the speed. And it wasn't only for Amazon S3 and the restores, it was also for our recovery to restore to AWS and restore to Azure functionality as well, that we saw tremendous speed increases in. So yeah, that to me is one of the biggest improvements in 10A as well.
Yeah, don't you just love the fact that it's all software defined as well, so you don't have to go down
software defined.
Start pulling out your hardware and leaving little slots and getting all cold in the data center. I still love that Silicon Valley episode where they turn up and they're like, your appliance goes here. And then they're like, okay, where does the next one go? And it's just rows and rows of racks, and they just look like they want to kill themselves when they're putting appliances in the data center.
You know, this reminded me, what I loved about Silicon Valley is how some of our technology partners that I won't mention, they basically got their logo on there, right? Do you remember that? Like one episode, they opened the garage door and there was that glowing orange sort of bezel. That was awesome. And then the box, from what I understand, the box that was being developed by Hooley, that actual plate was developed and created by SimpliVity.
Yeah.
So they actually created, it looked like it kind of had a bit of SimpliVity to it, right? Remember the signature edition?
Yeah.
How good was the signature edition? Still one of my most favorite scenes.
Is that show still on, or is it?
No, it finished.
Yeah,
it wrapped up. It wrapped up pretty well, actually.
Maybe that's my next thing I need to binge watch, because I watched the first couple seasons and then I didn't watch anymore.
Yeah.
I think
my favorite episode is when you stop becoming a billionaire and you have to buy a car that doesn't have doors that open like this. They open like that.
The ironic thing there is he was so angry that he had a Maserati, where else I would kill for a Maserati. So there you go. But yeah, I think
all they do is break down.
The Maseratis, yeah. To be fair, I've seen it. I don't see as much on the road. I tell you what, before the GFC over here, because I used to work near a car dealership in my first work area, and it was a fancy car dealership. So I saw Ferraris and Maseratis almost every day. And before the GFC, they were everywhere. Like it was just boom town, right? But afterward, I hardly see them anymore. You see the odd Maserati around. And actually, funnily enough, my son loves it because Lamborghini park's about 4 doors down. I don't know what it's doing in this area, but anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
You can't beat the old Lamborghinis flying around.
Yeah, so there you go. So we diverge a little bit, but I think we went through some of the benefits. I mean, Melissa went through and talked about Veeam Availability Orchestrator. For those that might not have known of its existence and what it did, that was a great intro into it. Melissa, David talked about 10A and how we've integrated our Veeam backup for AWS and brought that information into the Veeam console to be able to have a single view of management of all your policies and get a great overview of what's happening. We then talked about how that was visible in Veeam 1. And then for me, the object storage support increase in speed for restoration. It's tremendous, and it's just a great example of what can be done in software in a very short space of time to just keep on delivering value. So, 10A was big for us. I did forget one thing, and I'm pretty surprised that I forgot this. We actually support vCloud. Well, it's not vCloud Director. I've got to stop calling it that. We support VMware Cloud Director 10.1.
So
there you go.
Still vCloud Director, but just they've made the acronym
it's a big V now. It's a big V.
It's a big V instead of a little v. So,
yeah, I think that kind of placated everyone who was angry about the little V going away. So it's like it's still VMware Cloud Director, so it's okay. So that was it. Anyway.
So what we're saying is an advanced lab manager.
Well, yes, it's lab manager. Yes, we all know where it came from. Is there any VMware stuff? Is there any VMware piece of, apart from ESX? I'm just trying to think. From ESX, the original, GSX, what other piece of software is natively VMware's and not through acquisition? There's a trivia question for you.
Oh, vCenter, I guess you could say, or
there was quite a few, but they went end of life.
Yeah,
Like,
vCenter, yeah, and vCenters, if you wanted to do vCenter high availability, it was never fail, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah.
So even that was like not really native and that sort of thing. Anyway,
on the vCloud Director, it's actually quite funny because it's gone full circle. I don't know if you remember, but when you deployed version 1.0 of vCloud Director, the folder structure was actually called Cloud Director because they hadn't come up with the vCloud at that point. So if you ever go back and look if you want to go back into a museum piece and troll through my blog, you'll see some screenshots of like 2010 with folder structures where it wasn't called vCloud Director, it wasn't called VCD, it was just called CD. So yeah.
How awesome was that back in 2010 when I was like, it's so funny how things have just, worked out. But I used to like follow your blog and Chris Collotti's blog and Duncan Epping's blog. You guys were all blogging about vCloud Director.
Yeah,
I didn't have a blog back then.
Yeah,
neither did I.
There was Frank Denneman as well. We were all kind of like part of the original, what was called the cloud practice that they set up to go and build public and private clouds for service providers because nobody had a clue what a cloud was. So we were doing things with like some of the big telcos in the US and the UK, and that's how I met Duncan. We were quite fortunate. We got to stay in the Hilton at Tower Bridge in London. And
nice.
Little anecdote, I got very drunk one night watching the mighty Middlesbrough Football Club playing, and the poor waitress was walking past as they scored, and I jumped up and red wine went everywhere, and Duncan found it highly amusing. Just another episode of Duncan laughing at me doing something stupid, but
very English.
It was those early days of vCloud Director were phenomenal because nobody knew what was going on. All these service providers kept saying, we want public cloud, we want this capability, and VMware were the only software vendor that had any capability that could build it out. And of course, back in those days, AWS weren't even doing $1 billion. So
and you know why I eventually liked. We could spend a whole episode talking about this, actually. Yeah. You know why I actually went for vCloud Director? Because it was the only one that had the ability to view the console.
Yeah.
And the console proxy. And that was such a tremendously important feature. Yeah. And there was actually one other guy. There was another company that did it, a company called Orion VM in Australia. They basically were based off KVM and ran InfiniBand at the back end. So they were super quick. And they were the other ones that had a console, and that was only them and vCloud Director. That was crazy back then. Anyway, we'd spend a whole episode talking about that. But yeah, so we'll stop talking now. We'll wrap up. This was episode 8.
So
I
is
hope you enjoyed it. Talking a little bit.
History of vCloud Director then?
What's that?
Is episode 9 going to be the history of vCloud Director? Dave and
We
Spiteri go back in time.
We could get some special guests on. We could see if Duncan and Frank are still talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do.
All right.
Just ask them about my air soles, and they'll happily come talk about anything. But that
might be fun. All right, let's try the wrap up again. This has been episode 8. Thanks for joining. See you guys next time. Thanks, everybody.